tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
He was the most amazing guy in the world. I was the luckiest girl in the world to have him.
A fiancé holds out hope. The search for a missing fisherman who fell overboard in the Fraser River. Also,
it's time people take their tickets seriously.
How BC is getting tough on people who refuse to pay their COVID-19 fines. And
with more than 50% of British Columbians now vaccinated, how BC is shifting gears with the controversial AstraZeneca vaccine.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. Search teams remain hopeful they can find a fisherman who vanished after falling into the icy Fraser River.
As Susanna De Silva reports tonight, family and the fiancé of the Abbotsford man remain confident he'll be found alive.
This is just one of almost 24 boats scanning the murky waters of the Fraser.
We're all trying to cover as much water as possible. Right now we're overlapping each other.
Searching for any sign of 29-year-old Damien dutrasack.
Damien was last seen about 200 yards this way.
He was out fishing here with his friend Andrew when their boat capsized Friday afternoon. Neither were wearing life jackets.
Andrew somehow managed to get to shore and he looked back and Damien was no longer there. Andrew got to the shore and was there for about an hour before he heard a boat going by who managed to see him and flag him down.
Local search and rescue teams responded and searched until dark on Friday, but were unable to find him.
He is so strong. I feel like he could just be hanging out on a rock somewhere, you know? I really hope that's the case. I don't know. I really hope that's the case.
While volunteers scour the waters, his devastated fiancée walks the banks of the river.
He was the most amazing guy in the world. I was the luckiest girl in the world to have him. I just bought my wedding dress 2 weeks ago. Booked our wedding venue. We're getting married October 2nd. Had our whole lives planned, you know.
She, along with others involved in the search, are frustrated. Search and rescue were only called out the first day, suggesting some SAR members expressed frustration they weren't coming back. But the RCMP and SAR leaders say it is too dangerous.
The water is very muddy, it's about your hand high and flowing quite fast. It's a freshet right now. We did everything that we thought was feasible, reasonable that day, and safe.
But not everyone agrees.
If you're actually out here paying attention, it's not as bad as what they're saying it is, and search and rescue should be out here with us.
His fiancée says she will keep looking.
He would have never stopped looking if it was one of his friends, and that's just why I can't give up. I don't want to give up hope.
She's asking anyone near the river to safely keep their eyes open. Susanna De Silva, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, BC is getting tough on people who break COVID-19 regulations.
New legislation means those with unpaid violation tickets won't be able to get or renew their driver's license.
Tanya Fletcher is here live again tonight with details on that. So, Tanya, what exactly will this proposed law do?
Yeah, so the Motor Vehicle Act will trigger an RTI, or a refuse to issue restriction, to anyone with an outstanding COVID fine. So these can include tickets for gathering in large groups, hosting or organizing big events, even refusing to comply with law enforcement. So the changes would kick in July 1st, but would be applied retroactively. And notice will be served through ICBC ahead of a license expiry or renewal date.
If someone is unable to pay their fine, they can request that the court lower the fine during the 30-day dispute period. In addition, ICBC allows for repayment agreements under certain circumstances. It's not a measure to deny people their licenses. It is a debt collection tool.
And by the way, these changes also apply to any unpaid federal quarantine tickets as well.
Okay, Tanya, so why is this being brought in right now? Yeah,
well, to give you an indication, let's break down where we're at with the fines so far. So nearly 2,000 COVID tickets have been handed out so far, totaling $1.3 million in fines, but only 14% of that has actually been paid. Now, the province says a significant number of people are, yes, disputing their tickets, which is their right. And as for the newly introduced travel restrictions, Just one $575 ticket has been issued, and it's related to the road checks.
It involved speeding as well when the checkpoints went up on the 4 major routes, which would be Highway number 1, number 3, and number 5, and then also Highway 99 near Lillooet. 1,472 vehicles were checked. That is a significant reduction in the amount of traffic that one would expect to see.
And he says there's also been a nearly 50% reduction in ferry sailings as well since the travel rules were implemented. Mike, Anita?
All right, Tanya, thanks very much. Tanya reporting live tonight. The other numbers, BC is reporting 600 new COVID-19 cases today and 1 more death. The number of active cases is down to just under 5,900, and hospitalizations are down too, now at 423 people, with 141 in intensive care.
Well, a day after saying BC would keep using it, the province is now halting first doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine because of limited availability.
The pause comes after several other provinces also announced they'd stop giving out the shot. Our Dan Burt joins us now live with more on this. So Dan, what about people, first of all, who've already received a first dose of AstraZeneca?
The province says it is keeping all of its remaining AstraZeneca supply, about 15,000 shots, for those people who need second doses. It says if someone has booked an AstraZeneca shot at a pharmacy, those will still happen, but they won't accept any new appointments, at least for now. The pause comes after the day after Alberta paused using that vaccine, also over supply issues, and Ontario stopped, in part because of more cases of rare but potentially serious blood clots linked to that vaccine. Overall, Health Minister Adrian Dix says the immunization effort has ramped up significantly with a surge in other vaccines.
Got large supplies of Pfizer and Moderna right now, and this week well over 300,000 appointments are booked in BC, and over this week, the week that started Monday, and a similar number or more next week.
Dan, the AstraZeneca halt comes after a study around mixing COVID-19 vaccine doses.
Yes, the findings were published today in the medical journal The Lancet. They weren't presented as a full study, but what's called a correspondence. It found mixing different types of vaccine doses for 2 doses can hike the chance of someone having mild or moderate reactions like fatigue, headache, or fever. It found most of the effects are thankfully mild. As for what mixing actually does to a person's immune response to the disease and if it improves at all, researchers say they just don't know yet. Further research will be coming in the next couple of weeks. Dr. Bonnie Henry says they are also waiting for the findings on the interchangeability of vaccines, as well as guidance from federal officials to plan BC's approach for second doses. Before the province announced the halt to AstraZeneca doses, one pharmacist in Victoria says they've had a few cancellations, but not many.
Obviously, everybody has to do their research and make their decision as to, how long they are willing to wait for the provincial system. But we probably had about 5 cancellations, which is not too many, but about 5%.
The province adds no matter your vaccine or when you might get it, it stresses everyone will get a second dose within 16 weeks of their first vaccine. Anita, Mike?
Dan Burrett live for us tonight. Thanks, Dan. Well, just a few weeks ago, BC's third wave was precarious at best. Case numbers and hospitalizations were at record highs.
Well, today, things are looking very different. Greg Rasmussen shows us why some are cautiously optimistic our province has turned a corner.
If it weren't for the masks, it would seem like business as usual at this Vancouver Sailing Club.
Should things look a little more promising and open up, we're ready to add events if that looks like the safe thing to do for folks.
With COVID case numbers trending sharply down, more group activities could be in the cards. It's a sudden, welcome ray of hope.
How worried were you a few weeks ago as the numbers were spiking?
I thought we were in really bad trouble here in British Columbia.
This expert in pandemic modeling was surprised how quickly things have improved.
I thought it would take a lot for us to bend down these curves. I'm super impressed that we actually have bent the curves down.
Cases peaked at more than 1,100 per day, but now they're down to about half that. Health officials say closing indoor restaurant dining and putting regional travel restrictions in place bought time for vaccinations to ramp up. Where you live also plays a big role in the risk of getting sick. In the Fraser Health District, about 1 in 4,400 people per day are being diagnosed with COVID-19. But in the Vancouver Island District, it's only 1 in 50,000.
So this one says get your Tika, which is a few different South Asian languages for shot.
Even in the hardest hit areas, such as the Vancouver suburb of Surrey, vaccination outreach programs are beginning to pay off.
Yesterday alone, Fraser Health did 20,000 vaccinations, which is 1/3 of BC's total. So they're getting there, but it's just taking some time.
Back at the beach, even these paragliders have high hopes for a more social future.
Our normal social activities, they're online for the time being, but we would love to have an opportunity to get back and see our fellow flyers in person.
Something not too far over the horizon if BC's trend continues. Greg Rasmussen, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, more victims have come forward to report indecent acts from a man at a playground in Surrey's Fleetwood neighborhood. This has RCMP releasing 2 sketches of a suspect wanted in connection. Police say the man was first seen acting inappropriately near Coyote Creek Elementary School in the evening of April 29th. After releasing those details, 4 more witnesses came forward to report at least 3 more incidents. RCMP are sharing 2 sketches saying the suspect was seen clean-shaven in some instances, but with a goatee and mustache in others. He is described as a South Asian man, 20 to 30 years old, with a medium build and standing roughly 5'7". He has black, wavy, medium-length hair and brown eyes. His skin tone is medium or dark in color, and he has acne scars on his cheeks and chin. Police believe someone in the community will recognize this description, and they're asking for people to come forward.
The widow of a Surrey man murdered in a case of mistaken identity is fighting the decision to replace the RCMP with a municipal force.
I don't understand why we are all being kept in the dark. This is public safety. It's a right. It involves everyone. And how can you have any faith or trust in this process when you don't know what you're getting or how much you're going to have to pay?
Bennett's husband, Paul, was killed in his driveway in 2018. In her petition, his widow says the transition will have no benefit to public safety. She's also concerned about possible disruptions to the murder investigation.
New details tonight on a police-involved shooting over the weekend. The Independent Investigations Office says an Indigenous woman who was shot by RCMP Saturday evening in Port Albion is still in hospital in serious condition. The woman was shot after police say they found her in a home with a weapon. Officers had been called to the community near Ucluelet for a disturbance and a man needing medical attention. The police watchdog has confirmed a weapon that looks like a firearm was found on scene, and now it is looking into what role that weapon may have played in the incident.
A 19-year-old man has now been arrested in connection to a fatal hit and run in Burnaby. The suspect was arrested at his home. Police also seized a car they believe was involved. On March 26, 19-year-old Damien Sagan was struck and killed by a driver who fled the scene. RCMP are not releasing the name of the suspect. The investigation is ongoing.
Tensions are mounting over the city of Vancouver's plan to decriminalize drugs. The proposal is being called deeply flawed.
But as Isabel Regem reports tonight, the city's mayor is standing firmly by his proposal.
It could be a game changer in Canada.
People across the country are watching. We've got to get this right.
If Vancouver's plan to decriminalize simple drug possession gets federal approval, it would be a first nationwide. But a national coalition of advocates and researchers says the plan is flawed and needs a complete redo. The biggest point of contention, the quantity of drugs a person can carry without risking arrest or confiscation.
The thresholds in some cases should be about 7 times higher than what they are.
UBC Department of Medicine's Dr. Thomas Kerr says the quantities in the proposal now are far too low.
With the thresholds that have been set, we know that well over 50%, and in many cases more, of people who are very high risk of overdose would not be protected by this policy.
1, 2, 3!
Criticism over the proposal sparked this rally yesterday.
We're in the middle of an overdose crisis where a lot of people are using many drugs. And so you would think that the thresholds would actually match up with what people actually possess, but they don't because they didn't involve people from the beginning.
But the city's mayor is standing by the plan.
I understand that these are probably not what all drug users want. However, it does open the door for real action. And unless we open that door, nothing's going to happen.
Kennedy says approval is his first priority and changes can be made later.
If that means initially that there's lower thresholds and that gives the federal government enough comfort to allow the exemption, then that's worth doing.
Vince Tao says there has been a lack of proper consultation from the get-go.
The police have had full control over all the decisions made over this proposal. Drug users themselves are only contacted after the fact.
It's why he wants the city to scrap the current plan, even if that means delays.
There is time. Forget the elections. We need to do this right. Decrim needs to be done right.
The worry is rushing this long-awaited proposal could do more harm than good. Isabel Regam, CBC News, Vancouver.
BC healthcare leaders are apologizing today for systemic anti-Indigenous racism.
There are ways for us to do things different, to do things in a more culturally safe and thoughtful way, and that we need to start that work to change our processes as soon, immediately.
Executives from BC's largest regulatory bodies issued a joint apology to Indigenous people who have experienced racism in the province's healthcare system. The apology comes after a report found racism in our system is widespread and potentially deadly. Well, thousands of Muslims in BC are gearing up to celebrate Eid, or the festival of breaking the fast. It marks the end of Ramadan, and taking it even further, one group is donating food, PPE, and personal care packages to frontline workers.
The extent that we have been active this past year has greatly increased in efforts to give back to our communities, give a sense of hope and love to our communities in this time of uncertainty.
The event was planned for today to also honor International Nurses Day. Volunteers made more than 100 hand-sewn scrub caps and face masks and put together 150 tote bags containing non-perishable food items. Donations were made to the Greater Vancouver Food Bank, and Nurse Day gifts were handed out at long-term care homes.
Johanna Wagstaffe here now with our first check of the forecast. Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, and I could well be, but it appeared to me that there might have been some fair weather cumulus bubbling up over your North Shore Mountains over there earlier today.
Mike, you are right. Yes, indeed. I too saw those fair weather cumulus.
Sorry, I can't resist.
I was pretty excited about it as well. I'm glad I have someone to share the joy. And yeah, just a little instability behind the showers today gave way to the puffy cumulus on the North Shore Mountains. Otherwise, a nice end to a rainy start. And we really did need that rain. Moved in around 2 a.m. last night, continuing through to about the noon hour before things cleared out dramatically. Let's take a look at the current temperatures right now. A little chilly behind the rain, 16 at YVR though, and already into the high teens for Abbotsford. It was certainly good rain that continues to track across the province. Seeing showers tonight push through Kamloops and into the Kootenays. You're going to see that rain through the overnight as well, all the way up through the central interior and even the Peace catching the showers today. And I say good because that's the last of the rain for the next 5 days. Watch as I take you through the overnight clearing skies. Yes, we didn't quite sight the new moon last night, but clear skies for the overnight. A few high clouds moving in for your Thursday. Otherwise, maybe some afternoon fair weather cumulus, but that's about it for the week ahead. I'll tell you just how warm we get and when the next round of rain moves in coming up.
All right, thanks so much, Joe. And a reminder, you can also watch this newscast live on CBC Gem.
CBC Vancouver, also available on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram.
Tensions continue to escalate in the Middle East as Israeli and Palestine continue to attack each other, while world leaders plead for calm, and they're not being heard next. Just coming up on 6:19 on this Wednesday evening. Thanks for joining us during our commercial-free
live stream. Well, for many people launching their careers or even well into their professional life, the idea of working in the same job for decades may seem unlikely.
But on this International Nurses Day, we meet a healthcare worker who recently retired after 50 years at the same hospital. Travis McEwen looks back on her remarkable career.
This was our student nurse's outfit.
You might call it an antique. It's the nursing uniform Liz Barrell wore before she graduated in 1970. She's looking back on a 50-year career at the University of Alberta Hospital. This week, she officially retired.
I feel pretty good about it, and certainly glad I did it.
It wasn't an easy decision. Barrell used to spend the first 4 hours of her shift checking on patients and talking with them, but COVID-19 protocols changed that.
When you're in isolation, you don't have time at all to go in and speak to them. You go in and you do your vital signs, and then you get back out. So it did interfere with the basic nursing care.
Loyalty to patients and the hospital is one reason she worked at the same one for 5 decades. Her life revolved around it. It's where she found love. Her late husband, Henry, was a patient of the polio ward when they met. He died in 1980.
So I gave him, 10 years of like a out of hospital kind of basic life. And we had a house built, we had these 3 kids.
She's been known for going the extra mile for patients and advocating for them.
Liz would seem to ask herself, I wonder why this patient is so cantankerous or rude, and how can I break through that crusty armor and get to the real person inside?
Most of them are lonely, and they miss their families, and that's one of my big theories about nursing. Our patients is you have to let them sleep, and you have to let them have visitors. It's the 2 things that help patients the most.
The 72-year-old plans to focus that level of care on gardening, making pottery, and being a grandmother. Travis McEwen, CBC News, Edmonton.
That's a good long run. All right, for more on this story and more coverage of healthcare workers during the pandemic, you can always visit cbc.ca/BC.
Coming up next, data reveals the number of private planes flying in and out of Canadian airports during the pandemic. Stay with us.
CBC News has learned international travelers arriving in BC and Canada are skirting quarantine rules, and they do it because they can afford it.
Katie Nicholson shows us how hundreds of private aircraft avoid the quarantine system, unlike those who follow the rules.
In here, there's the shower.
Safia Hussein has been studying in Scotland for 2 years. Her first days back home spent here.
The hotel quarantine is, costed me a lot of money.
But not everyone's had to shell out for quarantine hotels. A CBC News analysis of data from flight tracking company FlightAware reveals that since hotel rules kicked in, hundreds of private aircraft have been flying into Canada, landing in airports other than the 4 where international traffic is supposed to go, like Kelowna, Winnipeg, and St. John's. Take the Hamilton Airport. Between February 22nd and April 26th, 572 aircraft landed here from international destinations, including the Bahamas, Florida, and California. And no, there's no quarantine hotel here.
It can't be sort of a 2-tier system where some individuals get to bypass that system.
The data also reveals that despite the advisory against non-essential travel, which grounded many commercial flights south, private planes are arriving from sun destinations like the Turks and Caicos, Tahiti, and Hawaii. Private operators say don't blame them.
We can't determine whether or not that is for a leisure purpose or a business purpose.
He says companies are following the rules. Some even offer rapid PCR tests, like this one. We will COVID test you so quickly you won't have time to get to the hotel, it promises. The federal government says no matter where they land, all arriving passengers get government testing kits, and that they are supposed to follow public health protocols. But to Safia Hussein, it feels like there are different rules for different travelers.
People that, are from an upper class, there's exceptions for them. And there's no exceptions for people that are, working class or middle class.
And for Hussein, no getting around a few costly nights here. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Toronto.
An independent review commissioned by the World Health Organization says the catastrophic scale of the COVID-19 pandemic could have been prevented.
As Tessa Arcilia reports, it concludes millions of lives could have been saved if there had been quicker international action.
The report highlighted some of the failures it found in terms of what the governments and organizations could have done, one of which is, lack of coordination or lack of recognition of just how serious the nature of that virus is from the start and failing to act quickly enough. The World Health Organization was also criticized for not having declared this an international emergency much sooner. That would have made a difference, the report says, in the response of governments, or it could have also recommended travel restrictions, for example, in order to restrict the spread of the COVID-19 virus.
Despite clear warnings, far too many countries believed it would not affect them. And they adopted, in effect, a wait-and-see approach.
The panel report also listed recommendations for what can be done concretely. For example, asking G7 and G20 countries to commit to giving funds to any pandemic preparedness and response funding in the future. Another idea put forward is asking the World Health Organization and World Trade Organization to gather countries that manufacture vaccines and discuss licensing and distribution, for example, should this become necessary again in the future. Here in the UK, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson also said that an inquiry will be launched into how the government handled this pandemic.
The state has an obligation to examine its actions as rigorously and as candidly as possible and to learn every lesson for the future.
So the main goal of these inquiries and looking back at what could have been done better will help organizations, countries, and governments to come up with a blueprint with concrete actions rather than just coming up with ideas on the fly, as they had done so in the last year and a half. So this will provide a guide moving forward should this become an issue again. Tessa Arcilia, CBC News, London.
Republican members of the U.S. House of Representatives have voted to oust Liz Cheney. Many believe her opposition to former President Donald Trump was the reason for her removal. Cheney, for her part, remains defiant.
I will do everything I can to ensure that the former president never again gets anywhere near the Oval Office. We have seen the danger that he continues to provoke with his language. We have seen his lack of commitment and dedication to the Constitution, and I think it's very important that we make sure whomever we elect is somebody who will be faithful to the Constitution.
She calls Trump's claims the big lie. Analysts say her removal shows the strength of Trump's hold on the Republican Party.
For a third day, violence between Israel and Hamas on the Gaza Strip is escalating. Israeli paramedics say a 6-year-old was killed and 5 people were hurt in a rocket attack.
Health officials in Gaza say at least 48 people, including 14 children, have been killed in Israeli airstrikes. Iris Mackler has more tonight from Jerusalem.
Israeli airstrikes in the Gaza Strip. Israel claims to have tracked and killed 6 important leaders from the Hamas and Islamic Jihad militant groups today. Israel's Prime Minister warns that more is to come.
Yesterday, I told those sons of darkness, the Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists, that they would forfeit their lives.
But inevitably there are civilians among the dead, and their numbers are rising rapidly. Nadja Abu Ara is burying her teenage son. It's hard for me, she says. My children are my life. Israeli planes also struck a multi-storey building. It was a media centre, housing Hamas and other TV stations. Israel says it warned residents to vacate before it collapsed. In retaliation, the Gaza militants sent a barrage of rockets into Israel. A direct strike on a building in the south wounded 5 people, including children. Israel estimates Hamas has so far fired more than 1,000 rockets since the escalation began Monday.
All of Israel's under attack. It's a very scary situation to be in.
I would like to see an end that will leave some kind of positiveness to find a solution between us and the Palestinians.
The violence is also spilling over into towns with mixed Jewish and Muslim populations inside Israel. The government has declared a state of emergency in the town of Lod near Tel Aviv and imposed a nighttime curfew. Clashes between Arab and Jewish residents overnight saw buses, cars and synagogues burnt by rioters.
Unfortunately, what we see there is an uprising, and it's regarding to what's happening at the Al-Aqsa Mosque.
As Israel masses tanks near the border, one Hamas official has begun talking about a truce, but others say they want to continue the fight. Washington is sending a diplomat here to try to reduce tensions on the ground. For CBC News, I'm Iris Makler in Jerusalem.
While questions continue to swirl tonight around the AstraZeneca vaccine, coming up, we're going to ask Dr. Srinivas Murthy live for his take on vaccine safety.
CBC News.
The birth of a nation was celebrated today in northern British Columbia, the Nisga'a Nation. It was born out of a long 113-year struggle by the Nisga'a for self-government and for land, almost 2,000 square kilometers in the Nass Valley. Terry Malevsky was there for the ceremony to mark an historic change.
He's singing it in the Nisga'a language, although the young people here don't really know "O Canada" in any language. In fact, for years, Nisga'a elders have told their children that this is not our song. But today, they cheered for the unwanted anthem because the Nisga'a Treaty is finally in force, and the elders say they have at last joined Canada willingly.
We are no longer wards of the state, no longer wards of the government. We are no longer beggars in our own land.
The suffocating weight and shackles of the Indian Act are gone and gone forever.
This was a day of triumph, especially for Chief Joe Gosnell, now president of the Nisga'a government. Yesterday, his new government sat for the very first time and passed 18 laws, setting up what Gosnell calls the Nisga'a Nation.
We didn't have to go to Ottawa or consult with the Minister of Indian Affairs. We exercised our right to govern ourselves.
The Nisga'a lands comprise a wild and spectacular 1,900 square kilometers of the remote Nass River Valley, home to about 3,000 Nisga'a people. They hope that their independence will bring prosperity. It is now 113 years since the Nisga'a chiefs first started trying to make a deal for their land with the white man. Now that they finally got that deal, the challenge, they say, will be to provide jobs for young people, to keep them here on the land that they've worked so hard to get. That will not be easy, according to Emma Nice, a sister to Joe Gosnell. She has 23 grandchildren, but 18 of them have left the valley, and she wonders if they'll ever come back.
Well, to be honest, maybe few of them will, not all of them. Like these ladies there. They say, Mom, we love it here, but we can't live here. There's no work.
Her brother promises to change that, but there is a long way to go. He's asking his people to be patient, and that, it seems, is something the Niska know how to do. Terry Malewski, CBC News, Gitwin-Silk, BC.
Here are some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
And I've had people going up and down on the boats all day. His workplace has sent boats out. I've had friends on boats and friends on boats and kayakers and drones, and I've had so much help, and I'm so appreciative.
Dozens of fishing boats are searching the Fraser River between Chilliwack and Mission for a missing 29-year-old Abbotsford man who fell into the icy water. It happened on Friday while he was sturgeon fishing with a friend.
And it is frustrating for all of us that there are some people who think the rules don't apply to them. Well, they do.
People with unpaid COVID-19 fines may not be able to renew their driver's licenses if they have outstanding tickets. ICBC will notify them ahead of their renewal.
BC has followed other provinces in reserving the remaining supply of the AstraZeneca vaccine for second doses. Existing bookings will still happen, but there will be no additional appointments to get the AZ. The province says this is because of a limited supply, but Ontario has stopped use of the vaccine over blood clot worries.
All right, let's dive a little deeper into this tonight. Joining us live is infectious disease specialist Dr. Srinivas Murthy. Dr. Murthy, thanks again for being with us here tonight. A change of gears, first of all, from the BC government today. What do you think about this decision to keep the remaining doses of AstraZeneca for second shots?
Yeah, it makes actually a lot of sense. From the data on Bathe, which is that complication we look for post-AstraZeneca vaccination, almost all of it is post-first dose. None of it seems to be post-second dose. And so I think reserving AstraZeneca doses for those who have already gotten AstraZeneca makes good sense in terms of using the supply that we have available to us. First doses is a different conversation that different provinces are responding to differently.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. BC says the decision is because of supply, but Ontario has pulled back on AZ because of blood clot worries. Do you buy what our province is saying?
Yeah, I think I do, in a sense, in that there isn't that much supply of AstraZeneca coming into Canada. As everybody knows, it's the workhorse for a lot of countries right now, and it's made primarily in India, who are struggling to get enough supply to their own population. So our timelines for getting more AstraZeneca into Canada aren't that good, and we're having lots of mRNA or the Pfizer and Moderna products coming into the country. And so preferentially giving those for first doses, given the risk that we know about for AstraZeneca, while reserving the second doses for AstraZeneca for those who've gotten the first dose makes good sense to me.
Okay, and we saw that new data coming out today about the mix and match trials from Oxford University. That study saying those who mix vaccines can experience symptoms at a higher intensity. Talk to us about those findings.
Yeah, it's actually great that they've done these studies, which are going to be hugely important as we sort of define our policy here in Canada. And so what they showed is that people who got a different dose of the second vaccine, either Pfizer to AstraZeneca or AstraZeneca to Pfizer, had more sort of fever, arms, swelling, pain for that first 24 hours post that second dose compared to those who just had the same vaccine for both doses. We don't know anything about the actual effectiveness yet. They're going to report that probably in the next month or so, but there does seem to be a different effect in terms of those side effects, none of which required hospitalization, none of which seemed particularly severe. And so it's actually reassuring data to me that this could be a viable strategy.
Okay, and how should Canada respond?
So right now, I think there's no urgency to get that second dose of vaccine in for the AstraZeneca folks who got it within the past few weeks. I think scaling out our first doses of mRNA, Pfizer and Moderna across our country as much as possible. We just hit the 50% threshold in British Columbia, which is great. And pushing that higher should be our primary goal. And then as data emerges about what to do with AstraZeneca, both from a first dose and second dose perspective, making sure we treat Canadians as safely as possible, but also appreciating that there's limited supply of the AstraZeneca vaccine coming into our country and reserving it for the people who actually need it in different parts of the world.
Okay, and excuse me, for those of us who have had the first dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine, and many people remain concerned, they're worried, is this symptom something? Remind us what we should be looking for and what the time frame is now from when you actually get the jab to when you're supposedly out of the clear.
Sure. And so what we've seen from the data around the country is that somewhere between 3 and 20-something days, maybe 21, 24 days, you can see these very rare symptoms. And if you do have something like a worsening headache, leg swelling, feeling very weak, chest pain, these kinds of things, give your family doc a call or go out to your emergency room. There are protocols at every hospital in the province about what to do and who to call in the case of those symptoms emerging, and what tests to send. And so I think the hospitals are aware of it, and so hopefully it continues to be very, very rare.
Infectious disease specialist Dr. Srinivas Murthy, always a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you.
Have a good evening, both.
It was a move to save Ontario's healthcare system. How patient transfers separated dying patients from their families. Next.
No problem.
And at 20 minutes before 7 o'clock on this Wednesday evening, a live look from the Swans Hotel in Victoria this evening. Beautiful night there and a decent day on the South Coast after those showers moved on. And it looks like we're in for a pretty good stretch ahead. Johanna has details next.
If you are a son or a daughter of an immigrant family who runs a small business, you can definitely identify with spending a lot of time in the shop.
Oh, it's just hard to wake up at 4. Everybody else is asleep in the world.
Hold up, 2 for 5s over here, baby. Hold up, 2 for 5s, niggas got garbage down there. Hold up.
My parents had strong work ethic. It was 7 days a week, 365 days out of the year, no days off. All right, your donuts are ready. My dad woke me up 5 a.m. every Saturday morning to come here and help him.
It's hard labor, it's physical, and no breaks.
I was working since I was 10.
We have the next generation helping here. We don't just have kids, we have future employees. You did it, thank you.
Growing up with my parents, helping them out, this is the only thing I know.
When I was younger, I kind of always thought everyone owned donut shops because my parents owned donut shops. No matter how much donuts we make, it's just all gone all the time. I went to my uncle's house when I was in 5th grade. He pulled out this newspaper scrap. When I found about TED, I was like, oh, actually, this is what our family does for business.
Uncle Ted has a very interesting reputation in our family.
I don't know much about Uncle Ted. I've only met him once.
I don't know much about him. I used to see him a lot when I was a kid.
What I heard about him is that he had a lot of money, had a lot of shops. He established a path for Cambodian refugees to actually have an opportunity in America.
I love America. I'm so proud that I live in America. I have my freedom. I can do whatever I want.
I'm not the only successful Cambodian-owned donut shop. There are many, many out there because Uncle Ted brought us here, and they are all hardworking people.
It really is about trying to understand where you've come from.
Well, during the worst wave of COVID-19 in Ontario last month, more than 2,000 patients were moved from hospital to hospital.
All to keep from overwhelming any one facility. But as Lauren Pelly reports tonight, some families now wonder if the risks around that travel prove fatal.
Driving is now a big part of Alison McVinney's daily routine. After her husband, Kevin Crozier, had a massive stroke in February, she followed him as he bounced back and forth between Ontario hospitals, from a specialized stroke centre in Toronto to a facility closer to their home, north of Barrie.
You're completely helpless. You're potentially going to have your spouse who can't communicate well, who's really hurt, get moved somewhere and potentially not see him again. Here's a skiing.
The 54-year-old architect and avid skier has been Alison's partner for the last 30 years and father to their kids. She thought his third transfer to a hospital in Barrie would be his last. Then came the pressure of rising COVID-19 admissions.
You could just feel the vibe and the energy changing, and things were getting stressful and decisions were being made. And then I got a phone call saying, you know, we are planning to start the transfer.
Kevin was sent to yet another facility in Orillia, his fourth move in 2 months.
COVID has its own path that's so destructive, but then now what it's doing is just, it's displacing all the people that need all the other important things. And, you know, it's kind of lessening their importance. And now I worry that he's kind of lost interest in things because he's just moved from place to place.
How does that make you feel?
Sad, terrible, you know, and all I want to do is encourage him all day.
At the Barrie Hospital where Kevin stayed before his latest transfer, they've had to build a field hospital and sent out 100 patients to make room for the 200 who've arrived from Toronto. Dr. Chris Martin heads up the critical care team.
Moving them patient, you know, an hour up the road or sometimes across the entire province to get care, that distance is very tough on families, and that's the biggest stress. The other stress is to the staff too, who feel the families' anxiety and their fear, the patient's fear as well as being moved further away from their family. So it's stressful all around.
Radhika Gandhi knows that feeling well. Her father, Kanaya Gandhi, was infected with COVID-19 late last year during an outbreak at the factory where he worked.
One of the things I was so grateful for that in Brampton Civic Hospital, there was a doctor that spoke my dad's mother tongue, and they were able to speak to him in Gujarati before putting him on the ventilator.
But the family soon learned the hospital needed to free up beds and planned to transfer him.
How much did that play into your family's stress level, too, on top of everything else that was going on?
Quite a lot. It was a lot. The reason they said they're transferring him is that he's the most stable out of all ICU patients. So we were kind of just like, is this going to impact his progress, the way that he's doing?
Kanaya had always been a source of joy for the family, a boisterous man who adored his wife and 2 daughters and worked tirelessly to make sure he could provide an education for his kids.
These are 2 of his rings that I wear around my neck. He wore these every day.
Kanaya passed away on February 4th at the age of 58. Only Radhika was by his side. The experience left her with questions.
In the weeks following his transfer, he got a lot of secondary infections. So that really made me wonder, was it because of his transfer? There's no evidence leading to that, saying that the transfer did anything, but you can only help but wonder.
Orange paramedic Naomi Williams has been shuttling patients around the province for months. But even she says she'd never want that kind of transfer for her own family members.
I've never done it where we're transferring patients just because of bed availability so much farther away from their family. So I can't even imagine how horrible that would be.
Each transfer can take hours, filled with perilous moments where Williams is alone in the back of the ambulance, watching for any bump in the road that could disturb a fragile patient. She now transports more critically ill patients in a single day than she used to in an entire month.
I've transported lots of people that are younger than myself, but usually it's a trauma or it's kind of a one-off. It's certainly never in my career have I transported so many people that are essentially just, they're sick from a communicable disease. So it's taxing, it's hard to watch.
So we so excited about the apples because Kevin's big thing is apple crisp.
Allison and Kevin moved to this rural property last fall to start a new adventure. Instead, they're stuck an hour apart.
We have to get back to families being with their family in these situations. And I can't imagine there won't be people looking back at this and thinking, how many people did we lose because the recovery got sidetracked?
Yeah.
And their families couldn't be there.
Now she's just hoping Kevin gets to come back home.
Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now. And Joe, I understand you're watching this drought situation in California pretty closely. What does this all mean for the fire danger there? Could it be as bad as what we saw last summer?
That's what officials are already worried about in California. Of course, last year was a record season, the most acres ever burnt in California, and that led to a very smoky end of summer and start to fall right across British Columbia as we got their smoke. I want to take you to the latest drought index from California. This just coming out today, where the drought emergency was extended. Everyone in that dark red under extreme drought, so 73% of California under extreme drought, and then the oranges, that's still severe drought, and even areas of California encroaching on exceptional drought. And this is after coming out of a back-to-back, a decade-long sort of widespread drought that we saw a bit of relief from early in the 2010s, but now we're right back into it. The snowpack this year was only in April 60% in the Sierra Nevada, where 1/3 of the water is supplied to Californians. A lot of that is because of melt in April and May. So definitely big concern that we're going to see not only water issues, already a lack of water across parts of central and southern California. And this drought emergency is extended to some of the populated areas in California. We're looking here at a snapshot of BC, Vancouver, in fact, from the North Shore last September. And this was all smoke from California, Washington, Oregon, from that exceptional wildfire season. Unfortunately, we are starting California off drier right now than we were this time last year. A lot of factors at play and a lot of factors go into an exceptional wildfire season like last year, but unfortunately not starting off on a great foot when we talk about exceptional drought and already very warm April-May conditions. Just want to show you our fire danger rating. I know we're watching that closely as we head into the spring months, up towards the Peace and northern ends of the Kootenays. Already seeing some moderate to high conditions, which is why getting the rain today, that'll be reflected in tomorrow's fire danger rating map. That is good news as we head into sort of a 5-day stretch of dry weather. Quick snapshot of the current temperatures across the country tonight. 5 out towards Halifax, 13 in Toronto, southern Ontario and southern Quebec, getting some summer-like conditions over the next few days, and very summer-like in through the prairies. Regina and Winnipeg are going to be hitting the mid to high 30s over the next couple of days. Taking a look at our 5-day forecast, we've got that high pressure building in nicely for tomorrow. Temperatures will be above our seasonal or 30-year average for the next few days. Inland, we'll be hitting the low 20s, and not out of the question, we could be hitting the high 20s, maybe even our first 30-degree temperature of the season for the interior this week. I don't know. Call me crazy. I'll keep my eye on that forecast.
Well, whatever's going on. In your neck of the woods tonight, it appears to be, based on what's going on behind you, a nice night for a nap.
Take it from my dog. It's a great night to sleep out on the grass. He's totally at peace. I recommend it.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Well, when a tree falls in a forest, when a hat trick is scored in an empty hockey arena, does anybody hear? Turns out they do. We'll tell you why coming up.
I've been cooking for as long as I can remember. Hey, hi, I'm Melissa Brown. I am Ojibwe and Jamaican, and I specialize in Caribbean and Indigenous foods. I am the owner of Brownie's Urban Bistro. I would say I started cooking full meals at age 7, but my interest in cooking was noticed by the time I was 4 years old, my mom would say. Because I was always like peeking in the kitchen at daycare, always hanging around the kitchen when my mom was cooking, so. All my friends were Indigenous, and if they weren't Indigenous, they were half Black, half Native like me, and there was a lot of us growing up in the West End. So, but we all seen each other as Indigenous because our mothers were Indigenous, we were culturally raised Indigenous. Yeah, we had brown skin, but we never identified as being Black kids. We were, Indigenous kids. Sometimes I would get experiences of like just comments from my friend's mother. Like I had friends, but they weren't allowed to play with me because I was Black. And I always felt like, I'm Indigenous, like what do you mean? And it was funny because my mom would teach us certain phrases in Ojibwe. And I remember going there one day and they were talking about me. Their parents were talking about me in their language, not knowing that I understood that they were talking about me. This is the Three Sister salad. And what I do is I incorporate plantain, because that's Jamaican, it's fried plantain. And then the syrup here is a maple syrup, because maple is Indigenous. So I tried to infuse the two, Caribbean and Jamaican, in all of my cuisine and all my dishes. And then with Black people, I never really felt connected to. I didn't feel comfortable. It's like, in like school, the Black girls would try to be my friend because I was Black, but no, I was hanging out with the Native girls, and I dated Native guys growing up, and so it was kind of funny like that. This is the bison. I seared it up on the pan first, just because it brings out the flavor when you sear up any type of meat before you put it in any type of stew. Growing up, I started to develop a sense of pride, and I had to do that on my own. It wasn't coming from my mom because she was so insecure. Like, she never wanted to go play anywhere where there was too many white people, or she wanted to go to places where there was Indigenous people, and she felt insecure around, just those type of feelings. So I had to develop my own sense of pride through my education and through learning more about my culture. Well, I started studying more of Indigenous culture foods, because I had a year to do nothing, and that's when I delved into Jamaican foods and Indigenous food, and I fell in love with my passion for cooking. It's like I tapped into that little girl who was 4 years old again. I kind of started experimenting and coming up with my own dishes and the fusion and whatnot, and then that's pretty much how Brownie's Urban Bistro was born.
All right, last Saturday's hockey game saw a very special victory for the Ottawa Senators over the Winnipeg Jets.
Broken up by Brown. Stutzla with the empty net for the hat trick. Goes to the goal. Scores. Tim Stutzla with his first career NHL hat trick to seal the deal.
Yes, Ottawa defeated Winnipeg by a score of 4-2. And thanks to Tim Stutzla, he scored a hat trick.
Now, usually that feat comes with hats thrown onto the ice, even away from home, but not when arenas don't have fans in them to throw them.
But when the team came home, the rookie got a big surprise visit at his own home. Check this out.
We were really like, wow, we need to do something because, that tradition of throwing off your hat on the ice and just them not being able to have fans this year, it's just not the same. For Tim Stutzla, he's a young player who's never really played in Canada before, coming from Germany. The World Championships didn't have fans. So we really wanted to, give him some good Canadian love and show, what a celebration of this nature would be.
I think he was a bit overwhelmed, to tell you the truth, which makes it all the more better.
A lot of kids are like 5, 6,
4,
3 years old. So
they had fun.
Yeah, we expect that our sons will be Sens fans forever, right? Because these moments are so impressionable and they'll be able to tell these stories forever.
Yeah, he's a very exciting young player. Here's what I always ask, Anita, when there's a hat trick and everybody throws their hats
What do you always ask?
on the ice, or in this case, into the yard of the house. Like, they're expensive, some of these hats, right? I know there's a mechanism for getting them
Quick
back.
story, my husband threw his hat out onto the ice for a hat trick, regrets it to this day. It was his best hat. So.
There you go. Try to get those back, but well done. All right, just a quick reminder, you can always watch our newscasts online anytime, cbc.ca/BC.
Our next local news right here at 11 o'clock with Dan Bird after the National. Good night.
Good night.